Um, I am here for Thursday's edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I gotta go quick because I'm running late today. So we'll start. The House passed a massive spending bill that's headed to the Senate with a deadline of Friday to avoid a government shutdown. The $1.5 trillion bill will provide nearly $14 billion in aid for Ukraine. This includes $6.5 billion for the Defense Department, $3.5 billion to replenish equipment sent to Ukraine, and $3 billion for U.S. troops who are helping to defend NATO and Europe. The bill would also provide money for humanitarian aid to support Ukraine's energy grid and to combat disinformation. The bill originally was slated to allocate $15.6 billion for the COVID pandemic response, but that funding was cut. The overall spending measure, which funds the government through September 30th, provides increases to both defense and non-defense programs. The chairwoman said that the measure would lower the cost of living for families and create American jobs. I think they just say that because they think it makes it sound better. Anyway, a direct quote from Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut says, quote, "During this time of great uncertainty and change, we are tackling some of the nation's biggest challenges, including making healthcare more affordable, confronting the climate crisis, and protecting our national security." The bill is more than 2,700 pages long. It's headed to the Senate. It was sent over last night and has to be passed by Friday evening. Today's Thursday. My guess is they're not going to be able to read it. Honestly, I don't think not one fucking one of them have read the bill. Buried within the bill is something that's called member-directed spending. And I'm not going to try to talk to you like you're stupid, but that's essentially earmarks or pork. It's a system by which federal spending in a certain district or state can be appended to legislation as a sweetener for the members of Congress representing those areas. When Republicans retook the House in 2010, they got rid of earmarks entirely. Now, we know that's not technically true because these bastards will spend money on any pet project that tickles their fancy. Leaders in both parties lost leverage over rank and file members and no longer had a carrot to dangle in front of wavering members to get them to sign on to a piece of legislation where the vote was tight. Now they can have more persuasive means by which to get the bills passed. Or maybe just write good fucking legislation for the American people instead of literally in a bill writing it so that you can give favorable spending to other members of Congress to get them to sign on to something they traditionally wouldn't. Oh man. With gas prices at record highs across the United States, an increasing number of governors and state lawmakers are calling for the suspension of gas taxes to provide relief to motorists who are facing the prospect of even higher pump prices as the country cuts off Russian oil imports. Michigan and Pennsylvania announced proposals yesterday to suspend or reduce state gas taxes after the governors from Georgia and California both called for relief on Tuesday. Critics of the idea say there's no guarantee that the savings would get passed on to consumers and worry that it could hurt funding for future road projects. The lost gas tax revenue would be offset by directing $500 million of federal COVID relief aid to state police and issuing $650 million in bonds to ensure infrastructure projects remain funded. So we're taking COVID relief money and giving it to the state police and putting it in bonds for infrastructure programs. Legislation pending in both the House and Senate would offset lost revenue from a gas tax suspension by transferring an equal amount of general fund dollars to the accounts that fund state highway, and public transit programs. The legislation is opposed by groups that advocate for road and bridge funding because they're afraid a suspension would become politically difficult to restore if politicians are cast as supporting a tax hike when it kicks back in. Perhaps the Biden administration could start looking at ramping up domestic oil production because we have the ability to do so. Instead, it's searching for it in the arms of Venezuela and Iran. So we're going to get oil, and it won't be from the big bag Russia, but we're going to go to Iran and Venezuela for it. Make it make sense. Days before Americans reset their clocks, a congressional committee is mulling changes to daylight savings time. The House Energy Subcommittee on Consumer Protection heard testimony Wednesday from health experts who urged Congress to pass a new law keeping daylight savings time in effect permanently. Originally, the shifting of clocks was implemented to preserve energy and resources during the early 20th century. In 2007, Congress expanded daylight saving by an additional 4 weeks each year. But the system is unpopular with many Americans and has inspired a new series of state and federal legislative proposals to change or eliminate the program. I personally love, like the whole fallback thing because you feel like you gain an hour. I despise the spring forward, like where you lose an hour. It's going to be a struggle bus once that happens for me to do this show, just FYI. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think it should stay? Do you think we should get rid of it? Should we just be on like one time the whole year? I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that. Indiana passes constitutional carry. I'm so excited. The Senate voted 30-20 for the bill for the first time in the Senate. It's the first time they voted for the measure. The bill's author said law-abiding Hoosiers shouldn't have to get permission to carry a gun, while criminals aren't going to worry about permit requirements in the first place. There's currently a 5-week wait just to get fingerprinted to start the process, and that's unacceptable for people who need or want a gun for self-defense. Opponents say the bill makes a mockery of pledges to ensure police always have the resources necessary to protect themselves and the public. The bill prohibits convicted felons, the mentally ill, minors, and those dishonorably discharged from the military from participating. Legislators and police leaders who oppose the bill say the permit system gives officers an immediate heads up that the person they've pulled over may have a gun. Without it, they say, there's no way to tell if a person is carrying a gun there's no way to tell whether a person carrying a gun is legally barred from doing so. State police say the permit system flagged and rejected 11,000 applicants over the last 2 years. About half for criminal records, and another 3,000 had their permits suspended. Governor Eric Holcomb has not said whether he'll sign the bill, but has acknowledged it's among a group of bills which will receive extra scrutiny. Should the state be the only one that can carry firearms indiscriminately? Should people with criminal records who have served their time not have the right to now defend themselves? Should you have to pay to exercise your right as a law-abiding citizen while criminals break the rules anyway? The idea that a permit or permission from the government to exercise the right to defend yourself should have never existed in the first place. This is just rolling back unconstitutional garbage as far as I'm concerned. And although it took them way too long to do it, I'm glad that Hoosiers are finally able to join the fold of people who are able to freely exercise their rights without having to pay to do so. Scientists have found and filmed one of the greatest ever undiscovered shipwrecks 107 years after it sank. The Endurance, the lost vessel of the Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton, was found at the bottom of the Weddell Sea. The ship was crushed by sea ice and sank in 1915, forcing Shackleton and his men to make an escape on foot and in small boats. Video of the remains show the ship to be in remarkable condition. Its timbers, although disrupted, are still very much together, and the name Endurance is clearly visible on the stern. The marine archaeologist who was on the discovery expedition said, "Without any exaggeration, this is the finest wooden shipwreck I have ever seen by far. It's upright, well proud of the seabed, intact, and in a brilliant state of preservation." The mission's leader and veteran polar geographer, Dr. John Shears, described the moment cameras landed on the ship's name as jaw-dropping. He said, "The discovery of the wreck is an incredible achievement. We have successfully completed the world's most difficult shipwreck search, battling constantly shifting sea ice, blizzards, and temperatures dropping down below 18 degrees Celsius, negative 18 Celsius. We've achieved what many people said was impossible. The wreck itself is designated a monument under the International Antarctic Treaty and must not be disturbed in any way. No physical artifacts have therefore been brought to the surface. The shipwreck has been colonized by an abundance of life, but not the type that would consume it. There's very little wood deterioration, inferring that the wood-munching animals found in other areas of our ocean are perhaps not in the forest-free Antarctic region." I encourage you guys, if you have time or are interested, little known fact, I absolutely love like shipwrecks, Antarctic stuff. Like I read a book when I was a kid that showed dead bodies. And what kid isn't fascinated by dead bodies? But it showed it was like mummified remains of people that had gone on this expedition. And I was obsessed with that book because the idea that these bodies were preserved for so long was fascinating to me. And so just from that point moving forward, anything like this is really cool. But the pictures are awesome to see, like a wooden ship from that long ago just sitting in the water. Like, it's really cool. I highly encourage you guys to check it out. Firm Pentagon no to the Polish plan to send jets to Ukraine. The MiG fighter jets that I mentioned earlier this week were nixed, and the Pentagon said Allied efforts against the Russian invasion should be focused on more useful weaponry, and the MiG transfer with a U.S.-NATO connection would run a high risk of escalating the war. By rebuffing the proposal involving the Polish jets, the Pentagon appeared anxious to move beyond what had become an awkward disconnect with a NATO ally at a time when President Joe Biden has stressed the need for a unified and coordinated response. Zelensky has pleaded repeatedly for the United States to provide his military with more aircraft, presented as an apparent alternative to establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine to suppress Russian air power. The no-fly idea was also rejected as an unnecessary risk of escalation. Last week, Antony Blinken had said Washington was looking at the proposal under which Poland would supply Kiev with the fighters, which Ukrainian pilots are trained to fly. But Poland wanted no part of that, concerned about involving itself too directly in conflict with Russia. As Biden calls for more NATO unification and handholding, Michael Baranowski, who is the director of the Warsaw office of the German Marshall Fund, told the Associated Press that the Warsaw government was, quote, blindsided and surprised by Blinken's public statement last week. This was seen as pressure from the United States on Warsaw, and therefore, the reaction was to put the ball back in the United States government's court. It should have all been dealt with behind the scenes. And that is your edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I hope you guys have an absolutely spectacular Thursday. Have a great day.